Hello and welcome to another game of Dota 2, where I pretend to be able to speak in full sentences, because I suppose it makes me feel better about myself. By the way, it is, I will admit, a short game today, which is the luxury of having replays to go off, because I can pick a game that fits the time frame I need significantly better, though it does seem like Dota 2 Pro Tracker knocks off a few minutes compared to what is actually going on in the game. Or maybe there is a pause. Who knows? We'll find out, and I will speed through it. Actually, let's leave it on directed camera for the moment while I look at what is going on. Looks like both teams will be making plays around the offlanes for the bounty runes, bringing 3 people there in force. Hard to say who's going to have the better time. Probably the Dire, the Arrow, and Fade Bolt, very strong level 1 spells, whereas Kotl and Tiny do lack a large component of their damage at the in the very early stages of the game. Though Monkey King, well, he certainly has damage, but he doesn't really start feeling scary until he gets that level 2 in Jingu. The question will remain, who is the position 5 on the Dire? Probably the Oracle, but you never know. I've seen Notail play Oracle mid recently, so it could be the offlane. Could be the offlaner. Could be the mid laner. Who knows? Not me. Now, directed camera should hopefully stay on this Phantom Assassin, but it isn't, so I will go back there with the free camera as the Phantom Assassin runs away from the gank squad of 4 to try and keep some of that HP alive, whereas Rubik has decided he wants to have a date with Destiny and gets ganked and stuck in the trees by the Monkey King. He has to skill the lift, throw him away, but Jingu is up, and I imagine that the green spindly man doesn't have much in the future, but actually the Monkey King decides efficiency is more important than killing a support and decides to TP to lane so he doesn't miss any of those creeps. Especially given he will now get the a little bit more XP because his support is absolutely nowhere to be seen. Meanwhile, up top, Oracle has already taken a lot of damage. But the return onto the Magnus, that is not an insignificant amount of danger that they are being put in. And Tiny, with no armor to speak of, wants to be a little bit more careful about getting stuck in the middle of the wave. Because if they decide to turn their focus onto him instead, it could get a little bit ugly for the tiny rock creature. I don't really have a defined way of talking about the game yet, but we could look at the mid lane where we're starting to see the stacks get built up. Storm, obviously starting Wand, has a full stick already. But playing into a Batrider is always difficult if you don't have some kind of purge, which is why the Magnus then dies on the top lane to a lag spike, apparently. We all saw what his health was on. It was merely a matter of time before he got caught out and absolutely twaddled. Batrider slowly starting to pull ahead in the mid lane, and by that I mean he has denies if less last hits, but he should be catching up now under the tower, even though I can't hit last hit with Batrider to save my life. The good players can, and I've been told he's quite a good hero. Though granted, whenever I see one, they decide to pop Firefly, dive over 3 walls into the middle of the enemy, and then get summarily punished for their conduct. Now, the Tiny has gone for a creep pull. We love to see it. BSJ keeps making videos about this thing, so I think everyone should know what it is by now. And the Tiny does manage to deny a full wave and pick up that level 2 for himself, but the Magnus is now left in a 1v1 with the... I can't think of a good epithet for Phantom Assassin besides the Phantom Assassin, and he tries to get away after the Oracle route, skewers back on the tower, but he brings the PA with him. The PA decides to take a dive, and Tiny will keep her there and teach her the real meaning of tower damage. And so, hard to say who won that one, but my god, it was quite entertaining. Storm already moving towards the jungle to try and jungle up what he can, because standing in lane against a Batrider is not fun for anyone unless you're a Slark with a stick. Now, in the bottom lane, I haven't really been looking here because after the start, I assumed it was an absolute clusterfuck, and I was right as the lift moves it away from the arrow. Very easy combo to set up, and these 2 chuckle fucks can't even manage that. Summarily, however, I'm sure they'll work out their kinks over the course of the game, or they'll get absolutely crushed because they cannot actually manage to CC chain with an instant stun. Either way, we do see the Rubik deciding that donkeys do not deserve to live. And so he snipes one courier, and then goes and decides to face tank the creep bull to try and get it back on track. Doesn't quite manage it, and has created chaos, which always suits the losing lane, in my opinion. And so they're probably not too fussed about it. Now, back to the mid lane, because these people are very even. Batrider is not pulled ahead, he just got a few more denies right at the start of the game, and the stick means that committing onto the Storm without a guaranteed 100 to 0 is pretty much a waste of time. And it wasn't a stick, it was a wand at this point. We do have a stack on the large camp near the top lane, and the Magnus just keeps getting right-clicked by the most incessantly annoying Oracle in the world. But Tiny has his level 3, has the Avalanche Toss combo, does manage to land it, if a little bit late, but that's the Oracle. Absolutely guaranteed to die, but will the Magnus follow? Manages to prematurely skewer. Disappointment to all when your skewer is that short, and when you blow it that early. So, but even despite the disappointment, PA does back off, clearly not wanting anything to do with him after that. And the Oracle's back, and this time he manages to pop his skewer at the full distance, but the Oracle decides to blow him up. Magnus already having blown his shot with PA. But the Tiny has really taken a liking to this Oracle, does go for another Avalanche Toss combo, and PA jumps on top of him, gets rooted up, and the rock will crumble. And yes, I am trying to just chat shit as much as humanly possible. Much as, ooh, the Oracle gets a nice disarm on the Magnus, buying him just a tiny bit of space, and enough time to salve up so he doesn't just get one shot by the overgrown sheep. Back to the mid lane, both of them have 6 now, which means there is some kill potential, and the first of the wand has been blown without lasso being used. There we go, Ball Lightning away, uses up almost the vast majority of the Storm's mana, so you know what, that's a pretty good trade for the Batrider. Down bottom, however, Kotl seems to have decided that Monkey King isn't really worth his time, and will have an absolutely fine time on his own. And is stacking, just in case, stacking presumably for the Storm, who can very easily clear those camps with his Q. Getting that efficiency in, it doesn't seem like it has harmed the Monkey King, whatever, giving him a little bit of levels, waves close to under tower, can't really get the last hits, but he's pretty vulnerable anyway. Kotl is not the best at, saving people in a hurry and really warding them away. Good lane presence. And speaking of presence, Storm and Batrider have both decided to show on top. Lasso blown on the Tiny, perhaps a little preemptively, as he does seem to be getting away. But Batrider will finish him off with the Fireflies. The toss combo comes in, but Storm picks up the Oracle on the backlines, as the Rubik does fall down bottom, and it now is back to a 2v2 with the cause, both supports falling. Truly, it is a hard life as a support, and the Batrider goes home, whereas the Storm has decided he is going to abuse the bounty rune that has been left there so kindly by his team, or summarily forgotten about, hard to always say, and bottle back up. I didn't lose anywhere near as much, and unsurprisingly does have a much lower cooldown ultimate than the Batrider. Magnus once again getting bullied in the top lane just a little bit more, but can the Oracle heal him up? No! And he will die once again. Hard to say who's really being favoured. Only 1k in it, and everyone seems to be having an absolutely wonderful time, except for the supports, who are being summarily executed at most opportunities, while Kotl is still sitting around this area trying to stack up the camps. Monkey King now having completely abandoned the high pressure lane, because even if they can't chain a stun together, the threat of it is still quite concerning, and they both right click and do a little bit of damage. So against someone who has not the largest HP pool in the world, it might be a little bit disconcerting, and so he's backed off into the jungle with, as we know, Monkey's excellent wave clear and ability to just speed through camps, and by that I mean complete fucking inability to do so without levels or items. So he's going to have a bit of a slow day. PA, meanwhile, having a pretty nice time up top, is already working towards that Battle Fury with the Wraithband Power Treads. Complete a classic combo that. We see it on anti-mages all the time. As a dive comes in towards the mid-tier 2, Tiny tanks an arrow for his blue brother and tries to toss off the Mirana, but she doesn't quite take. And the mid laners battle over a stacked camp, and I can't quite tell who won. However, something happens with the lasso, and it's just a disappointment all around for all those involved. Oracle, however, put himself in prime position to snipe some couriers and then get dove by 4 people on the enemy team, so we'll be seeing if that happens summarily, but no. Storm has decided he wants to jump straight onto the PA and last hit a range creep. Oracle, teleporting too far forward, but manages to get that 100% magic shield off while they blow all of their magic damage. Brilliant move. And they do crush the rock into powder once again. Storm blowing all his mana to just try and get away, because as I've noticed, Storms do not do jumps by halves. They either go in or they go out, and they use their mana doing so. There are pros in this game. I don't know who they are, and I'd rather not, so I don't have to pretend like I respect any of the people in this game. They may be better than me, but I can still make fun of them. Not that that's my initial intention, but my god, this game feels to me like a bit of a fiesta. That always hurts Rubik. Just seeing that creep on 1 HP, then the last hit just cruelly taken away from us by the world. Not really fair, is it? PA still working on that Battle Fury. Hasn't actually managed to get very far. Tiny gets the Invis rune, however, which means he is able to pop out a rock and sock and gank with ease, so long as they're not under some sort of true sight. And there isn't a huge amount set up. All the wards are towards the mid lane, and it looks like there will be some TPs. Bottom, Tiny's running down, and the Randy Rhino is summarily executed, while the glowing orb distracts the remaining of the Dire team. Oracle face tanking. Man has absolute orbs of steel as the Kotl gets finished up, and he doesn't even die for it. That Oracle just knows the limits of his hero and is unwilling to let anyone survive. While the Batrider decides that Invis is overrated compared to a courier kill, and they finally manage to chain some CC together, but unfortunately the other team also decide to do so as well and jump in with an RP, but a quick disarm from the Oracle prevents the majority of the Magnus' damage, but a pull on the backline bullies both of the supports as they all fall. Rockman surely to fall before anything else happens, and the Mirana's stuck behind enemy lines. And a little bit of unlucky positioning and timing means the arrow doesn't connect, and there's a standoff in the offlane. But now the Kotl arrives with mana for the Storm, which actually allows him to go for a zip for 3 meters before he then runs out again, and all of a sudden the stalemate is broken. They're back on the offensive and then the defense, and now they're back on the offensive again. Arrow completely misses, and Storm decides to drop items and try and get some mana back just in case they decided to swindle melons him. Always got to give them that opportunity in honor of the greatest Storm of all time. PA still working on that Battle Fury. Little bit slow, I'm sure, by the standards of Reddit, but it will do just fine. I think this is the most offensive I've ever been in a game, much like this Oracle, who decides to absolutely demolish a Storm's very identity alongside the lasso from the Batrider. Kotl getting a rundown like the old man he is. You don't go very quickly if you are a senile old grandpa compared to a spry Batrider.
Radiant's middle tower is under attack.
Tiny desperately trying to find his blink dagger amidst all the chaos, but is stuck with a pair of boots and some dust instead. Rubik now really wants to go for the stack world record here, though there isn't anyone on his team who clears this until that PA gets a Battle Fury, which is still a little bit away. So if that triangle gets invaded. They have a Magnus. And they also have a Storm Spirit, so those stacks can just vanish very quickly. And it seems like they've realised that, and they're going to clear them as a team-building exercise, where Oracle is considering stealing the entire camp, but is kind and decides not to in the end, as he, I'm sure, can see the inevitable rage quits when the Batrider doesn't quite understand the real version of farm priority, where the Oracle gets it all and nobody else gets any.
Dire should look to their top tower. Dire structures are fortified.
Storm not finished up with the Orchid, and frankly, if the Battle Fury comes out before the Orchid, you know something's gone a little bit topsy-turvy. Even though the Storm has the most last hits in the game, he has the third highest net worth and is firmly behind the 2 cores on the Dire side. Speaking of cores on the Dire, the Batrider has another Invis room. We'll see if he decides to sniper Courier or go for the Old Man. He thinks about the Old Man, but then decides to go for the Courier instead. Has still got the lasso, which he can use to hold the Storm in place. But it doesn't last quite long enough, and they lack the damage to finish the Storm off. So, once again, a bit of a disappointment. Though I'm sure they won't be complaining about once again beating down an Octogenarian.
Radiant's middle tower is under attack.
Magnus, however, calmly farming away in his mountains of the top lane, trying to bring home his daily bread. Barely further forward on his Blink Dagger than the Tiny, and decides the best way for him to get this Blink Dagger is to now go mid to steal kills, which he manages to pull off quite nicely, while the Tiny once again gets set back on the Blink Dagger, even though he's actually closer to it than the Magnosaurus, by a rather irritated Batrider who didn't even need the lasso. Now the Orchid is finally complete, which means it did just about come out before the Battle Fury. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt, and I'm starting to doubt who's going to win this fight, as the Batrider's forced back alongside the Storm, both pretty low on resources, as the Clarity's desperately trying to refill the Storm's mana, which he immediately spends jumping on top of the Oracle, who has no ult and is silenced up. But ticking down to the Flame Break isn't quite enough, not enough sticky stuff on that Storm. And we'll know that for the future. Because if you're not tarring up that Storm, you're not going to do enough damage to really clean him up. But that's the thing, the damage wasn't truly there. The PA isn't online yet, but now with the Battle Fury, she can start to get quite scary. Similar to the Monkey King, who, while having a Battle Fury on his team, seems to still be a little bit behind, because the Battle Fury has decided to play his own game rather than just focus on his carry, who is currently getting run down. A little bit of fancy footwork from the Batrider, dodges the Skewer, and the Magnus is stuck in unfamiliar territory, roped up, and rooted to the spot until he dies.
Roasted, toasted, and burned to a crisp.
And now they finally managed to transition into a tower push. Only 2 towers have been taken, those standard towers in the safe lanes, which really do get bullied quite a lot. I feel like Valve should patch the game so that they aren't quite as painful. I mean, I wouldn't want to be a tier 1 tower in the safe lane. I'd much prefer to be an off-lane tower. Nobody cares about you then. And it seems like Storm has decided to try and go on the PA, but not realise that he's bit off a little bit more than he can chew. And Batrider decides to turn up, try and get TP in with the Oracle root on top of him, but that is a little bit of an optimistic play. But speaking of optimism, the Tiny tries to go for something and fails miserably. Whereas the PA doesn't need any items to do a huge amount of damage. She just jumps and once again cuts down a senile old man. But the Storm teleported back out of the fountain. Now he is back. Monkey King just barely staying alive thanks to his recovery, and they've decided to go onto the PA. But the Storm's out of mana again. What's he gonna do now? He's gonna turn around and die, apparently, to the Mirana, not the PA. But I don't think there'll be too many complaints about that. That is a bit unfortunate, and a bit of a poor management of the mana to allow the PA to tank full 2 gut initiations by the Storm and get the rest of your team killed in the meanwhile. But hey, the Oracle died. So there's that. And now the Desolator on the PA is complete, so she's actually going to do damage now, as opposed to the fake damage she was doing beforehand. Oracle just giving PA a little bit of a helping hand in the farm by preventing her from hitting any creeps for a bit. And now there's a haste rune, which I'm sure the Bat will be more than happy to do, as he drops several lines of coke and flies forward at the speed of sound to look for a pick, though one is unlikely to be forthcoming as they're all hiding in their fountain. But now they show towards the top lane, and he decides that he is going to have a date with the Monkey King. Cuts him rudely down from his tree to start off, and now here's the Oracle to follow it with the root, but a nice little stun onto 4 buys him a whole half a second of time. Moonlight Shadow has been dropped, so that they can now sneak up on an old man, who is in prime position to snipe out a courier, filled with senile old rage, and then he will escape. But the Dire have their eyes on a bigger prize, a big fat beastie that lets you live twice, known as Roshan in his pit. A very peaceful creature, the Roshan. He doesn't really mind you if you leave him alone, and yet we consistently slaughter him for our own benefit. Really, what monsters are we? Incredible monsters, apparently, as the Batrider gets impressively CC chained all the way back towards the tier 3, but doesn't actually manage to fall because the Oracles manages to glide his way over just in time to press the I win button. And everyone runs away happily, having killed off the 2 supports again, who really aren't having the greatest of times this game. Has Tiny got his blink dagger? He has. Let's see if any plays come out of that, because I certainly haven't seen any yet. With a double damage in the river and an Aegis on the PA, you're going to start being slightly terrified for your buildings. We'll see what they do. In fact, the PA has decided... The Batrider has sacrificed his bottle, in fact, for the PA, so she may choose a more opportune moment to go for... to engage it, which is apparently right now before she sees anyone particularly important on the map. A collection of enemies in the middle lane, all 5 of them. Let's see if PA can 1v5 Rampage as she smells it in the air. That is one. Storm disappears in terrifying fashion, and Monkey King almost follows, does get the burst from the Tiny, but does she have any lifesteal? She does not. Didn't go for the talent, but it doesn't matter. The damage is overwhelming, and it turns out you can't kill her with right clicks. If you can kill her with magic damage like they just did, she just gets back up. DD no longer relevant. However, having already vaporized Storm into his namesake, she decides to get back up, crawl out of the grave, and rampage through the opponent team, picking up all 5 kills, and then chipping her blades on the concrete of a living tower. Would not be surprised to see them push for the tier 3. Granted, the Storm might actually manage to have some sort of impact now, but without the level 25 talent, he does not have the free D-push button. And I imagine he's a little bit traumatized from seeing his life literally flash before his eyes. Indeed, so traumatized he is asking them to end his suffering. And the Cottle is complaining about the vast majority of his team. The real question is, which ones? I wonder who. I wonder who. He says the rank 150. Who are the pros in this game? It looks like somebody called Bobobo, who I've never heard of. Not Mirana, Phantom Assassin, thinking about the dive, and then realizes that Blur isn't actually perfect, and she instead buys 2 crit sticks, because what you need on Phantom Assassin is more crit. And suffice to say, one final attempt to genocide the elderly by the Batrider, and we should come to the end of this game. Sped up for your viewing pleasure and my sanity. Oh, they actually started doing something, though it is unlikely to make a huge amount of difference as the RP ends up with him stunned in his own fountain. Yay!